Section 2.5 deals with rational expressions and equations, and we're going to concentrate on the equation part. Now remember, the word rational does mean fraction. Now to solve these rational equations, you do need to get rid of the fraction by multiplying everything by the least common denominator. You do need to solve whatever's left, and then you're going to need to check your answer. Not to see if you did it right or wrong, but to see if you can use that number as an actual answer. Because you remember, you cannot have 0 in the denominator, so you got to make sure your answer does not make the denominator 0. So looking at this first problem, we're going to need to multiply by the least common denominator to get rid of fractions. Well, the least common denominator is made up of factors. The first two denominators will not factor for us, but the third one will factor as x plus 3 and x minus 2. So our least common denominator would be x plus 3, x minus 2, and I'm going to multiply every term by that least common denominator. Now, if that is actually our least common denominator, then all of our denominators should cancel. So for the first fraction, the x plus 3's cancel to leave us 6 times x minus 2. Second fraction, the x minus 2's cancel to leave us 5 times x plus 3. And then on the other side, everything cancels to leave us the negative 20. Using our distributive property, we'd get 6x minus 12 minus 5x minus 15 is equal to negative 20. Combining like terms, we've got x minus 27 is equal to negative 20. Moving that negative 27 to the other side, it becomes positive 27, and we get our possible answer of 7. Now remember, we do need to check to make sure that it does not make any denominator 0. Plugging into the first denominator, 7 plus 3 is 10, 7 minus 2 is 5, and remember that last denominator is just the two previous denominators combined, so we know that 7 is our answer. This next one, none of our denominators will factor, so we know that the least common denominator would be both the x minus 4 and the x plus 3. So writing it out beside every term to remind me of that. And again, my denominators should cancel. So the first one, the x minus 4's cancel to leave me 2 times x plus 3. Second fraction, the x plus 3's cancel to leave me 3 times x minus 4. And then on the right-hand side, of course, 1 times anything is itself, so we have the x minus 4, x plus 3. Using our distributive property, we would get 2x plus 6 minus 3x plus 12. On the right-hand side, doing the full method, we get x squared plus 3x minus 4x minus 12. Combining like terms on the left, we get negative x plus 18. On the right, we would get x squared minus x minus 12. Recognizing the x squared on the right-hand side will give us a quadratic equation, we'll set it equal to 0 and solve. So moving everything to the other side, that negative x becomes positive x, the 18 becomes negative 18, and the quadratic equation that we need to solve is x squared minus 30. Now there is a shortcut to solve that. If we move the 30 back over, we can use the square root method, and we would get x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 30. Now, we do need to check our answers, and I really don't know what the square root of 30 is. You could use your calculator to find that exact amount, but I do know that in the first denominator, 4 is the only number that would make it 0. In the second denominator, negative 3 is the only number that would make it 0, and the square root of 30 is neither 4 nor negative 3. So I know we can use those as our answer. This third one. Again, we got a factor to find our least common denominator. That third denominator does factor as x plus 7 times x minus 2. So our least common denominator would be the x minus 2 and x plus 7. To help me remember that, I'm going to write it out beside every single term. First fraction, x minus 2's cancel to leave me x times x plus 7. Second fraction, the x plus 7's cancel to leave us 5 times x minus 2. And on the right-hand side, everything cancels to leave us x squared. Using our distributive property, we would get x squared plus 7x minus 5x plus 10 is equal to x squared. Now when you first look at this, you might think it's quadratic and we would need to set it equal to 0. So if I move the x squared that's on the right hand side over to the left hand side to set it equal to 0, what happens is those x squareds cancel out and we're left with just 2x plus 10 is equal to 0. That is linear, so I'll move the 10 back over, divide by 2, and that gives me a possible answer of x is equal to -5. Again, checking it, -5 minus 2 is -7, -5 plus 7 is 2, and you know that third denominator is just made up of those first two, so -5 is your answer. Now this next example is a problem very similar to one of the ones in your homework, and if you do not simplify it first, it's going to make the problem much more difficult for you to work through. So let's look at how to simplify this. On the top of the first fraction, you can take out a greatest common factor of x squared. On bottom, you can factor that as x minus 5x plus 3. And then you really can't do anything to the second fraction. But notice, in that first fraction, they both have an x plus 3 in common, so we can cancel that out to simplify it before we start working the problem. Now, if you'll notice, the only denominators we have is an x minus 5, so we'll multiply both sides by x minus 5 to get rid of my fractions. So I'm going to have x squared is equal to 4x plus 5. That is quadratic, so I'll set it equal to 0. And I will factor it as x minus 5 and x plus 1. Now, setting both of those equal to 0, we would get x equal to 5 and x equal to -1 as our possible answers. But if you were to take those numbers and plug it back in, what you're going to find is that 5 gives you 0 in the denominator, so you cannot use it as your answer, but the -1 does not. So your only answer would be the -1. All right, one more. It's already factored for us, so we know the least common denominator is x plus 2, x minus 2. Multiplying by the least common denominator, in the first fraction, the x plus 2's cancel to leave me the 3 times x minus 2. Second fraction, the x minus 2's cancel to leave us 2 times x plus 2. And on the right-hand side, everything cancels to leave us 8. Using our distributive property and combining like terms, we would get 5x minus 2 is equal to 8. Now this is linear, so I'll get the x by itself. Dividing, we will get our possible answer to be 2, but if you plug it into that second denominator, it does make it 0, so you cannot use it. And since that was your only choice, you have no solution. Now, a word problem that you could have in this section deals with a working problem and things working together. One hose can fill a swimming pool in 12 hours. The owner buys a second hose that can fill the pool at twice the rate of the first one. If both of the hoses are used together, how long does it take to fill the pool? Now, what we need to look at is what can they do in 1 hour. If one hose can do it in 12 hours, then in 1 hour he's going to get 1/12 of the job done. If the second hose can fill it at twice the rate, that means he only takes 6 hours to do it, and then he would be 1/6. Now, how much of the job is done in 1 hour would be 1/x. So to solve this, we'll multiply everything by the least common denominator, which is 12x. 12's cancel to leave me x. 6 will go into itself once and into 12 twice to leave me 2x. X is canceled to leave me 12. So we get 3x is equal to 12. Last step is to divide. Would give us x is equal to 4. Now, notice they are working together, so we add their fractions. If they were working against each other, maybe a hose and then a hole or a drain in the pool, they would subtract.